They say some places are lost for a reason, but we never understood that until we found Ozymandias. We had been trekking for hours, our boots sinking deeper into the mud with every weary step. The forest, a relentless sea of green and brown, seemed to swallow the sunlight, leaving us in a perpetual twilight. My backpack, which had felt light with the promise of adventure that morning, now sagged heavily, its contents pressing against my shoulders like a physical manifestation of doubt. It was supposed to be an escape, a break from the predictable grind of city life, a quest for something genuinely extraordinary. My companions, Leo, the group's irrepressible leader, always pushing the boundaries. Ben, our resident tech enthusiast and amateur photographer, perpetually seeking the perfect shot. Clara, the pragmatic one, her phone always ready with maps and contingency plans. And Lena, whose quiet sensitivity often picked up on nuances the rest of us missed, shared my initial excitement. Our goal was simple, yet ambitious: to find an adventure that lay far beyond the worn paths and overcrowded overlooks, something truly unique, something that would etch itself into our memories forever. Leo, who had been setting our ambitious pace, suddenly stopped. His hand shot out, cutting through the damp air, pointing to a barely visible seam in the dense foliage. "Hey guys, look at this," he announced, his voice barely containing a thrill. Our eyes followed his finger to a path, or rather the ghost of one, veering sharply to our right. It was a mere whisper of a trail, shrouded by overgrown hawthorn bushes, tangles of thorny brambles, and hanging tree limbs so low they seemed to guard the entrance like ancient, gnarled sentinels. You could have walked right past it 100 times and never known it existed. Clara, ever the cautious planner, pulled out her phone, her thumb already navigating to her map application. She held the screen up for us to see, her brow furrowed in a mixture of confusion and burgeoning intrigue. "It's not on the map," she stated, her voice quiet, almost reverent. Ben's eyes, usually narrowed behind a camera lens, widened with palpable excitement. "Should we check it out? What do you think?" he asked, his tone betraying a desperate hope for a yes. A strange tingle of anticipation, an electric current of shared curiosity, surged through our small group. I felt it too, a magnetic pull toward the unknown, and before I could overthink it, I heard myself say, "Let's do it. We're here for an adventure, right?" The air around us crackled, charged with a thrilling blend of eagerness and a nascent, unacknowledged apprehension. We pushed forward, forcing our way through the overgrowth. Thorny branches clawed at our clothes, leaving small tears in the fabric, each tear a tiny rip in the illusion of our controlled expedition. Our boots slipped on uneven terrain, roots and stones hidden beneath decades of undisturbed leaf litter. It felt as if we were trespassing on time itself, walking on ground that hadn't known the weight of human footsteps in generations. We took turns with the small, serrated machete Ben had thoughtfully, or perhaps presciently, packed, hacking away at the thick, obstinate foliage that clung to the path, determined to keep it secret. After what felt like an eternity, though my watch later told me it was only about 20 minutes, we emerged from the suffocating density of the forest into an open expanse. What greeted us next stole the air from our lungs, stopping us dead in our tracks. Before us, stretching as far as the eye can see, was a city. It sprawled across the landscape, covering what had to be several square miles, its architecture a breathtaking confluence of styles we couldn't place, as if multiple eras and disparate cultures had converged to create this singular, impossible metropolis. Towering buildings, some 6 or 7 stories high, rose like silent giants, crafted from a stone that possessed a subtle, iridescent quality, shimmering with an ethereal glow in the dappled sunlight filtering through what little tree cover remained at the city's edge. These structures were adorned with intricate carvings, a dizzying array of designs ranging from complex geometric patterns to remarkably lifelike depictions of strange, unfamiliar animals and faces contorted into expressions that were, even from this distance, profoundly disturbing. Columns topped with ornate capitals, Framed grand entryways and vast plazas were centered around magnificent fountains that, though now silent and dry, stood in immaculate condition, defying the ravages of time. The cobblestone streets were narrow and winding, laid out in an organic, almost chaotic fashion, suggesting the city had grown naturally, like a strange, petrified organism, rather than being meticulously planned. Despite the obvious lack of human presence and maintenance, there was no moss, no creeping vines, no overgrowth choking the streets or climbing the walls. The stone surfaces were impossibly clean, devoid of dirt, dust, or grime. Not a single building showed signs of decay. Rooftops were intact, windows perfectly clear, walls solid and unmarred. "Wow," Lena breathed, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes wide, visibly struggling to process the impossible sight before us. Ben was already fumbling with his DSLR camera, his hands eager, adjusting the lens with practiced speed. "I can't believe it," he muttered, mostly to himself, as he began snapping pictures, attempting to capture the city's astonishing grandeur within the confines of his frame. "What era does this even look like? Roman? No, older than that, maybe Mesopotamian. Or something else entirely." Ben wondered aloud, his camera momentarily forgotten as he swept his gaze across the endless rows of buildings. "It's hard to say," Clara replied, her voice hushed. "It could be thousands of years old, but look at it, it's pristine." The city exuded an aura of timelessness, yet it felt ancient, impossibly aged. Our best guess was that it was a relic of an era long forgotten, perhaps predating any civilizations known to human history. And yet, it stood as if brand new, untouched by the passage of time, creating a dizzying disconnect between what we saw and what our minds struggled to comprehend. Despite the awe-inspiring sight, an unsettling quiet pervaded the city. There was no movement other than the occasional, almost imperceptible rustling of what looked like ancient, stiff banners hanging from some of the structures. No people, no animals, not even the buzz of insects. Even the wind, when it stirred, seemed to move in hushed tones, as if afraid to break the profound stillness. The atmosphere was thick with an eerie silence, a quiet so absolute it made our initial excitement waver, gradually replacing it with a prickling sense of caution. You think it's strange. A city this grand in such good condition, but there's no one here. Clara finally voiced the thought that had been nagging at us all. "It is odd," I agreed, trying to inject a note of bravado into my voice, "but maybe that's why it's in such good shape. No one's here to ruin it." My words sounded hollow, even to my own ears. As we stepped onto the cobblestone streets of the city, the soft thud of our boots echoed off the ancient stone walls that surrounded us, a surprisingly loud intrusion into the profound silence. The buildings loomed above, casting intermittent, lengthening shadows as the sun began its slow, deliberate descent toward the horizon. Leo, with his natural inclination for leadership, took the lead, guiding us deeper into the city. Ben and Lena followed close behind him, cameras in hand, Lena's less for photography and more for clinging to a sense of normalcy. Clara and I brought up the rear, our heads swiveling, our eyes scanning every shadow, every intricate carving, searching for anything unusual. The further we walked, the stronger the sensation became that we were not alone, even though no one else was in sight. It was a prickling on the back of my neck, a subtle shift in the air that suggested eyes upon us. We arrived at a small square, flanked by buildings with balconies overlooking the area. At its center stood multiple stone statues, each carved with an unsettling amount of detail. These figures were not the stoic, heroic representations one might expect. Instead, their faces were contorted into expressions of unmistakable fear and despair. Eyes wide, mouths open in what looked like a silent, eternal scream. Each one was unique, a frozen tableau of agony, but equally, profoundly disconcerting. "Look at these statues," Ben said, snapping a few pictures but keeping a respectful distance, his enthusiasm now tempered by a tremor of unease. Lena examined them closely, then took an involuntary step back. Yeah, those are creepy, she whispered, a visible shiver running down her spine. It's so odd. Why would anyone create statues that look so terrified? We continued our journey deeper into the city, finally arriving at a large, central square, clearly its heart. The space was vast and open, surrounded by structures even taller than those we had seen before, their balconies offering a dizzying bird's-eye view of the entire area. Dominating the square was a colossal statue of what appeared to be a deity. The figure was meticulously carved, its robe adorned with complex flowing patterns, an elaborate, almost grotesque crown adorning its head. The eyes of the deity were inlaid with some type of reflective, crystalline stone, giving them an eerily lifelike, piercing quality. Leo was practically buzzing with a mixture of excitement and awe as he took photos from various angles. "Guys, this is a once-in-a-lifetime discovery," he exclaimed, circling the massive statue, capturing its astonishing details. Lena, on the other hand, seemed increasingly uneasy. "But why is it so quiet?" she questioned, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And does anyone else feel like we're being watched? It's unsettling." I felt it too, a cold prickle along my arms, and admitted as much, looking around the square, half expecting to catch sight of someone or something, observing us from one of the darkened balconies. A shiver coursed down my spine, and I reflexively tightened the straps of my backpack. Clara looked around, her eyes meeting each of ours in turn. "Yeah, this place is incredible, but I have to agree, it's giving me the creeps. The silence is just too intense." After a moment of shared glances and nervous nods, we collectively, if reluctantly, decided to explore a little more before making our way back. However, as we voiced this agreement, an uneasy thought crept into my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that we had become entangled in something far grander, far more ancient, and infinitely more dangerous than ourselves, something we couldn't possibly comprehend. For the first time since stumbling upon this hidden city, I found myself questioning the wisdom of our adventurous detour. A cold knot forming in the pit of my stomach, we continued our walk through the city, captivated despite ourselves by the sheer complexity of the architecture. The buildings were imposingly tall, crafted from that unique, shimmering stone that resembled marble but possessed an otherworldly sheen. Leah couldn't stop taking photos, and every now and then he would show us a shot that captured the impossible grandeur of this mysterious place. "Think of what an archaeologist or historian would give to see this," Leo murmured, switching lenses on his camera, already envisioning the accolades. "Yeah, but the more important question is, why haven't they? How could a place like this stay hidden?" I asked, my eyes scanning the elaborate facades as we navigated the winding cobblestone streets. The numerous unsettling statues became increasingly difficult to ignore. Unlike the stoic or celebratory sculptures one might find in a typical city, these figures were disturbingly lifelike, their faces frozen in expressions of profound dread. They appeared at regular intervals, some solitary, others in groups, as if they were citizens of this city, captured in mid-screams, lining the streets, peeking from windows, tucked away in shadowed corners. "These statues are really everywhere, aren't they?" Lena said, her voice tinged with escalating concern. "Yes, it's as if they were part of everyday life here until whatever happened, Ben commented, his eyes resting on a statue of what appeared to be a family cowering together, their faces a tableau of shared horror. Leo put his camera down for a moment, his usual ebullience momentarily dimmed. "The craftsmanship is exceptional. I wonder if these were residents or just artistic depictions of a pervasive fear," Clara chimed in, her voice flat. "Well, either way, it's pretty unsettling, especially considering we don't know who made them or why they look so afraid." We continued to move through the streets, but the initial sense of awe was slowly, inexorably overshadowed by a growing feeling of profound discomfort. "Look at this one," Lena said, her eyes narrowing at a particularly disturbing statue of a woman clutching a child to her chest. Both the woman and child had faces twisted in pure, unadulterated horror. Clara stepped closer, her face reflecting the chilling mix of fascination and dread we all felt. It's incredibly detailed but also terrifying. The artist captured fear so realistically. What could have possibly happened here to make them create something like this? Before any of us could even begin to speculate, Ben interrupted, looking perplexed at his handheld GPS unit. Something's off. According to this, we're just in an empty expanse. No city, no forest, nothing. I pulled out my phone and navigated to my Maps app, only to find it glitching, unable to pinpoint our location, its screen flickering erratically. You're not alone, Ben. My GPS is also broken. And is anyone else's battery draining unusually fast? That's strange. My phone's battery is at 20% and it was nearly full when we left, Clara said, showing us her screen as proof, its display dimming even as she spoke. Leo looked at his phone and frowned. Same here. I was at 80, now I'm at 10. By now, we were all on edge. What had started as an exciting adventure was beginning to feel less like an exploration and more like a trap. The feeling that we were being watched was intensifying, my skin tingling as if tiny insects crawled beneath it. I noticed everyone else seemed to be fighting off shivers, rubbing their arms, casting furtive glances into the deepening shadows. We exchanged glances, each of us grappling with a growing sense of alarm. Whatever curiosity we had felt at first was now tinged with a caution that bordered on outright fear. We made an unspoken agreement to stay close, very close, as we continued to explore what was clearly no ordinary city, and then we started hearing them. Soft whispers that filled the profound silence, almost like the wind but more structured, like muffled, indecipherable conversations. Words or the suggestion of them wove through the still air, yet we couldn't pinpoint their origin. It was as if the city itself was speaking to us, or perhaps lamenting. Footsteps echoed behind us, a syncopated rhythm that aligned too perfectly to be random forest noises or our own echoes. We spun around simultaneously, expecting to see someone, but the cobblestone street was empty. No animal, no person, just the eerie statues that lined the path, their frozen screams mocking our growing panic. "Did anyone else hear that?" Ben asked, his eyes wide and his voice an octave higher than usual, a tremor running through it. Lena nodded, her gaze flitting from one shadowy corner to another. "Yes, whispers, and footsteps, right? And yet there's no one else here except us. It's like we're in a ghost town, but more unsettling, more malevolent." Leo held his camera tightly, as if its plastic casing could serve as a shield against the creeping dread. "We need to understand what's happening, and fast," he said, his usual bravado cracking. "You're right, Leo, but how do we do that?" I responded, the weight of our impossible situation settling over me like a shroud. "Our GPS and phones aren't working. It's not like this city came with a guidebook or warning signs. We're flying blind here." Our eyes met, and we all knew that whatever excitement we felt at first had now curdled into a sharp, pervasive apprehension. As we stood there, pondering our next move, a sudden, unnatural gust of wind swept through the city. It was strange, chilling, and it sent shivers down my spine. The statues seemed to watch us more intently, their crystalline-laid eyes almost accusatory, their frozen faces seeming to twitch at the very edges of our vision. "Okay, this is too much. We need to leave," Clara said, her voice laced with fear, her usual composure utterly shattered. "But we've just scratched the surface," Leo protested, still trying to cling to the thrill of discovery, a desperate glint in his eye. "Think about what we could discover." I weighed the options in my mind. On one hand, this place was a treasure trove of unknown history and architecture, a discovery that any explorer would kill for, a story for the ages. On the other, the city was profoundly unsettling, filled with fearful statues, unexplained phenomena, and the undeniable, intensifying sense that we were not alone, that we were being hunted. "Let's stick to the original plan," I finally said, making a decision that felt both pragmatic and cowardly. "We'll explore for a few more minutes, but if anything else strange happens, anything at all, we're out of here." "Agreed." Everyone nodded, albeit reluctantly, their faces pale in the fading light. We continued our exploration, each step now a calculated risk. We walked through the twisting, maze-like streets of the city, my eyes constantly scanning, searching for an exit, a landmark, anything familiar. My gaze caught on a building that stood out from the rest. Its entrance had an arched doorway, and the pillars flanking it were covered in detailed carvings that looked like a bizarre blend of floral and geometric patterns, unlike anything else we'd seen. "Hey, look at this," I alerted the group, pointing toward the intriguing building. "It doesn't look like the other structures around here, does it?" Leo stepped closer, holding his camera up, ready to capture the moment. "You're right, this place is special. Let's see what's inside." As we stepped through the arched entrance, the atmosphere changed profoundly. It was cooler inside, and the air hummed with a strange, contained energy, like a powerful current held just beneath the surface. We found ourselves in a room that immediately reminded me of an ancient library or study. Several stone tables occupied the middle of the room, meticulously aligned as if waiting for scholars who would never return. What captured our attention most, however, were the walls. They were not just simple stone, they were canvases entirely filled with inscriptions. The script, engraved deep into the stone, was nothing like any of us had ever seen. The lines curved gracefully, intertwined with symbols that looked neither alphabetical nor numerical, utterly alien. Lena stepped closer to the inscriptions, visibly puzzled, her fingers hovering inches from the stone. "This doesn't look like any language I've seen. It's as if someone took the concept of writing and entirely reinvented it." Ben pulled out his notebook, sketching some of the symbols with rapid, almost feverish movements. "We need to document this. Who knows what kind of information is hidden here?" Clara, however, kept her distance from the walls, eyeing them cautiously. "As captivating as this is, it's also kind of eerie. Do we even have the right to uncover what's been hidden here for so long?" We all looked at each other, each pondering Clara's ethical question, but also equally, undeniably enticed by the room's promise of long-forgotten knowledge. Leo lowered his camera for a moment, also caught in the tension between awe and caution. "Well, one thing's for sure, this room is a discovery that poses more questions than answers." Feeling increasingly uneasy, we finished taking what photos we could of the inscriptions and exited the building. No one spoke much as we made our way back to the central square to set up camp. The atmosphere was thick with tension, palpable in the silence between us. It was as if the city itself was weighing on us, pressing down with an invisible, suffocating force. Leo broke the silence as he started to unpack the tent equipment. "I can't believe what we found, but the quicker we set up, the quicker we can rest and think through all of this." Ben and Lena were already spreading out their tents, ground tarps nearby, their movements stiff and hurried. "Let's get this done. I'm not comfortable spending more time here than we have to," Ben said, his voice carrying a note of urgency, an edge of fear I hadn't heard from him before. Clara unpacked her sleeping bag and unrolled it inside her tent with brisk, almost frantic movements. "I hope we have a peaceful night. This place doesn't exactly exude calm." As we staked down the last of the tents and secured the zippers, everyone exchanged glances. It was clear that while the central square was breathtaking, with its large open space and towering deity statue, it also felt like the most exposed and vulnerable place we could be in this eerie city. Finally, our camp was set up. Despite the beautiful buildings that surrounded us and the undeniable historical importance of our discovery, we were all feeling the profound heaviness of the situation. The city's alien architecture, the haunting statues, the mysterious inscriptions, and our malfunctioning electronics had left us all thoroughly on edge. We gathered together for a quick meal of packaged camping food. As we ate, not much was said, the unspoken questions about this place hanging heavy in the air between us. We finished eating and agreed it was time to turn in for the night, each of us hoping that dawn would bring more clarity than the setting sun, or at the very least, a sense of safety. The tension was overwhelming. We sat huddled outside our tents, Ben's flashlight beam darting around nervously, barely piercing the thick, oppressive darkness that had enveloped the central square. "Did anyone hear anything before Leo shouted?" I asked, my own flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. "No, nothing. Just that eerie silence," Lena responded, her voice thin with anxiety. Clara, ever the practical one, was busy checking the ground near Leo's open tent. "Look here, footprints. But they're not like any shoes we're wearing," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, pointing to a set of marks that looked unnaturally large and oddly shaped, almost too perfectly formed for natural footfalls. A cold wave of dread washed over us as we pondered the implications. "So what does that mean? Did something take him? Or did he walk off?" Ben asked, his voice rising in pitch, teetering on the edge of hysteria. "I don't know, but standing here isn't helping. Let's split into pairs and search. We'll cover more ground that way," I suggested, my own sense of urgency escalating, trying to maintain a semblance of control, agreeing to stick close to the central square and not stray too far. We divided into teams. Ben and Lena went towards the eastern section, their flashlights bobbing like nervous fireflies. Clara and I chose the western section, where we had seen an unsettling number of those fear-stricken statues. Our flashlights illuminated snippets of our surroundings as we walked, the beams glinting off the polished stone of the figures that now felt even more menacing, their eternal terror a silent accusation. Each shout for Leo echoed through the labyrinthine streets, but was met only with oppressive silence, which swallowed our voices whole. The feeling that we were being watched intensified, making me grip my flashlight tighter, my knuckles white. After what felt like an agonizing eternity but was probably only 10 minutes, we converged back at the central square. No one had found any sign of Leo, but Clara was holding something up, her hand shaking. It was Leo's camera, its strap tangled. She had found it near one of the most haunting statues. A man with his face twisted in unimaginable terror, his stone hands reaching out as if for help that never came. "I found this just lying there, next to that statue," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. The chilling realization hit us all at once. Leo was missing, in a city filled with statues depicting fear and terror, and now his camera showed up near one of those very statues. We were scared, puzzled, and above all, desperate to find our missing friend. But as we stood there, flashlights in hand and hearts pounding, it was clear that the city held more mysteries and dangers than we could have ever imagined. "This is bad, really bad," Clara said, her words heavy with dread. Ben took the camera from Clara's shaking hands. He fumbled with the playback button, and then we saw it. The last picture Leo had taken. It was a selfie, his face pale, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream, his hand reaching out. And in the background, out of focus, was the arm of the statue. But it wasn't stone. It was flesh. And then the image flickered, and the arm in the picture was stone. Pure, unyielding stone. A cold wave of horrifying realization washed over me. We were in danger. The warning signs had been clear, blatant even, but we chose to ignore them, blinded by the thrill of discovery. Now one of us was gone, absorbed by this place, and it was clear that we were not welcome here. "Guys, we need to get out of here right now," I said, my voice carrying a new, desperate sense of urgency. The image on Leo's camera burned into my mind. The rest of the group nodded, their faces pale in the flashlight's beams, the earlier reluctance utterly gone, replaced by naked fear. As we started to pack up our camp hurriedly, each fold of the fabric, each click of a buckle, sounded unusually loud in the oppressive silence. Ben and Lena moved with a frantic energy, stuffing their gear into their bags. Clara stood guard, her flashlight scanning the dark corners and alleys that surrounded the central square. "Let's stick close together," she suggested, her voice betraying a hint of raw apprehension. "Agreed," Ben replied, his face still showing the deep distress over Leo's disappearance. As we shouldered our backpacks and started walking toward what we desperately hoped was the city's exit, I took a final, fearful look at the mysterious building where we had found the inscriptions. Our footsteps echoed on the stone-paved streets, merging with the indistinct whispers that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. I thought about Leo, his excitement, his infectious enthusiasm for this expedition. But now he was gone, absorbed by the city, leaving a void that was palpable in each one of us. It was as if the city was sending us a clear, terrifying signal, one that screamed for us to leave while we still could. Suddenly, Clara stopped abruptly, causing me to bump into her. "Do you hear that?" she asked, her voice tinged with stark worry. Before anyone could answer, we all noticed it, a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground, through the very soles of our boots, as if the city itself was resonating with a frequency of its own. It added another layer to the eerie feeling that we had overstayed our welcome, that the city was now actively aware of our presence. "Let's keep moving," Ben finally said, his voice strained, breaking the momentary, terrified silence. As we navigated through the winding streets, every statue we passed seemed to glare at us, their stone eyes almost following our movement. Their silent screams, now feeling like a mocking echo, took the lead as we tried to backtrack toward the forest, the place where this nightmare had all begun. Ben was right behind me, his flashlight darting back and forth nervously, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Clara followed, her own beam of light scanning the ground, as if expecting it to open up beneath her at any moment. Lena brought up the rear, her quiet whimpers barely audible. "Wait, this can't be right," I said, stopping abruptly at an intersection that definitely wasn't there before. The street had changed. "What's going on?" Ben asked, his voice tinged with a rising sense of dread, his eyes wide and fixed on mine. "I don't know this layout. Streets are missing or changed," I replied, my own mind reeling. "Are you sure?" Clara joined in, her voice betraying a hint of desperation. "Could we have taken a wrong turn?" "I'm certain. The statue of the two warriors was right here. Now it's just a fountain," I said, pointing at a stone basin filled with stagnant, eerily still water. "This city is playing tricks on us," Ben concluded, a note of terrified certainty in his voice. "More like a trap," Lena said quietly, her voice barely audible. "What?" I asked, turning to look at her, my blood running cold. "Think about it. The statues, the whispers, Leo's disappearance. And now this," Lena replied, her eyes fixed on some point beyond us, as if seeing something we couldn't. "That's too bizarre, even considering what we've experienced," Clara said, trying to dismiss the idea, but her eyes betrayed her. She too was considering the horrifying possibility. Suddenly, Lena walked over to a statue near us with a curious, almost trance-like look on her face. Her eyes were locked on its stone arm, tracing the intricate musculature. The statue's face showed extreme despair. Its eyes seemed to be begging for relief from eternal agony. Her hand hovered over the statue's arm, as if she was waiting for it to give her a sign, a morbid fascination drawing her closer. "Lena, don't!" I shouted, my voice echoing off the stone walls of the surrounding buildings, a desperate, futile warning. But my warning came too late. The instant Lena's fingers made contact with the cold, unyielding stone, her body stiffened like a board. A gasp escaped her mouth, a sharp, choked sound, but before it could fully form into a scream, her flesh began to ripple, to shift, to calcify. Her skin hardened, her features contorted, her clothing becoming rigid, melding with her new, horrifying form. In a matter of seconds, she turned into stone, her new petrified form capturing that final, agonizing expression of horror, her eyes wide, mouth agape, making her a permanent, grotesque part of the city's eerie gallery. "Oh my God!" Clara cried out, her face going stark white as she stumbled backward, tripping over a loose cobblestone but managing to catch herself before she fell. "We need to go now," Ben yelled, his face flushed with terror, his eyes wide with unadulterated panic as he grabbed my arm, pulling me in the direction we had come from, though it no longer felt like a direction at all. Emily's shocking transformation clarified the horrifying reality we were facing. This city was not just abandoned. It was a sentient and malevolent force, a monstrous entity that fed on fear and preserved its victims in stone. There was no doubt left in any of us that we were its intended prey. But this realization, however terrifying, also instilled in me a grim, desperate sense of purpose. Now that we understood, even in the crudest sense, what we were up against, we had a chance, however slim, to escape its clutches. "Listen," I said, pulling Ben and Clara close to me, my voice low but firm. "We can't touch anything. No more experimentation. No touching the walls, the statues, nothing. We can't try to manipulate the city or engage with it in any way. We just walk straight, without deviation, without touching anything." "Got it," Ben and Clara nodded, their faces pale but their eyes filled with a new, if desperate, resolve. "Understood," Ben replied, his voice low but steady, his hand still gripping my arm like a vice. Clara simply nodded, gripping her flashlight so tightly her knuckles were white. Taking this as agreement, I took the lead once more, my eyes fixed on the distant horizon, or what passed for a horizon in this unsettling place. We started walking again, our steps synchronized, cautious, as we moved through the labyrinthine streets. Each footfall felt heavy, a calculated risk in this enigmatic, murderous place. We walked in complete, suffocating silence, the air around us thick with tension and unsaid fears, punctuated only by our ragged breath-time seemed distorted here. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, an eternity of walking. The sky remained a constant twilight, offering no clues, no sense of passing time. Our pace quickened as the silence grew heavier, pressing down on us, yet we remained cautious, careful not to disturb the deceptive tranquility of the city any further. And then, just when despair started to feel like our only companion, a sight for sore eyes emerged from the oppressive grayness. I saw it first, the unmistakable outline of trees, real, living trees in the distance. "Look over there," I pointed, my voice tinged with a mixture of immense relief and disbelief. Ben and Clara followed my gaze and saw it too. Trees. They stood tall at the edge of the city, their leaves rustling in the wind, a sound that, though natural, now felt like a desperate, beckoning call. They formed a clear boundary between this cursed, sentient place and the world we came from. The world we were desperate to return to. Collective sigh of relief escaped our lips. Though we weren't out yet, the sight of the forest gave us renewed hope, a surge of adrenaline and the desperate will to push forward. We quickened our pace, but remained as quiet and respectful as ever, not daring to defy the city that had already taken so much from us. "We're almost there," Ben muttered, his voice barely rising above a whisper, as though he was afraid that the very stones beneath our feet might hear him and retaliate, snatching us away. Ahead of us, the cobblestone street abruptly came to an end, giving way to the inviting, familiar texture of earth and grass. A boundary, both physical and metaphorical, lay between this city of malevolent enigma and the welcoming, safe arms of the forest. Our steps grew faster, propelled by an urgent, desperate blend of hope and fear as we closed the remaining distance. Finally, our shoes left the hard cobblestones and met the soft, yielding soil of the forest floor. Breaking into a desperate run, we plunged deeper into the welcoming embrace of the trees, not stopping until the city was well behind us, an impossible memory receding into the terrifying distance. Finally, panting, exhausted and trembling, we collapsed onto the forest ground, our limbs aching, our lungs burning. Our electronic devices, previously useless husks, suddenly buzzed back to life, their screens flickering with notifications, an impossible connection to the world we had thought lost. "We need to alert the authorities," Ben said immediately, his voice hoarse, his fingers already dialing a number. They answered, a calm, professional voice on the other end, but we found ourselves utterly at a loss when asked for the exact location. How do you pinpoint a place that doesn't wish to be found? Search parties were dispatched. Helicopters with thermal cameras crisscrossed the sky, and aerial surveys were conducted, but the lost city remained hidden. No trace of it could be found, as if it had simply vanished into thin air or had never existed at all, a nightmare dreamt by 3 desperate survivors days later. We sat through endless interviews, investigations, and grueling medical examinations. Yet no one could explain what had happened to us, what we had seen, or why Leo and Lena had simply vanished. We were labeled as survivors of an unexplained disappearance, given clean bills of health, and advised to seek therapy for trauma. But the truth gnawed at us, a constant, sickening ache in our souls. We had left Leo and Lena behind, lost to the stone embrace of that impossible city in the dead of night. I often find myself staring at the photos we took, especially those Ben managed to capture of the inscriptions in that cursed library. Despite numerous attempts, no one can translate them. But I don't need a translation. I know. I know they were a warning, an ancient, desperate plea from those who came before us, those who also found the city, those who also failed to heed its malevolent warnings. A warning that we, too, had failed to understand until it was far, far too late. Though we escaped the city's clutches, its enigma lingers, a permanent shadow over our lives. It remains hidden, its location a mystery, its very existence a question mark that no one can answer. But one thing is terrifyingly clear. The city chooses who enters and who leaves. We were lucky, perhaps, or perhaps unlucky, to leave with our lives, but forever branded by the inexplicable horrors of a city lost in both time and space. A city that now holds 2 more silent, screaming statues, eternally awaiting new visitors. What was your favorite part of the story? Want more stories like this? Follow for more.